And I used to be kind of spooked by that. I thought having to tell a source, hey, so I need you to be on your computer. I need you to open this link and do X and Y. As a reporter, I was like, I need this to be I need as few barriers as possible. I need it to make it as easy as I can on the other end in order to pull off these interviews. But as technology's gotten better and COVID has kind of shown me, it's kind of forced me into for work and social, how powerful, video chats can be and how useful they can be.
Welcome to The Other Side. My guest today is Sports Illustrated writer Brian Burnside. Brian, how are things where you are? Where are you?
In Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, doing pretty well. It's nice to be close to the beach and be able to get some social distance Saturdays at the beach to help break up the monotony that has been 2020. So doing pretty well, get some sunshine, especially relative to our old home in Indianapolis, which is a little bit, I think it's already cold there. So
it's going to be winter for 8 more months there. Last week, I think it was the Gigi Wu, the Bikini Climber story was released and published. Brian, and I'm sorry, I already forgot the name of the help you had there. But what I wanted to talk about today was not so much the story in particular, but going about reporting a story like that. It's an international story. It needed a translator. It needed a lot of different sources because the protagonist in it has deceased, and you can't, you're going to have to get a lot more information that way. And so I was curious to give us a little background on the story, obviously, but I'm curious, what went through your mind when you had to figure out how to write that in the time of COVID?
Sure. No, that's a great question, because I think how we had to report the story kind of ultimately informed the shape of the story to that in a bit. But as for the genesis of it, we kicked the idea around, and it was February or March. We're kicking the tires on it, and that's right when COVID started. And the plan all along was, okay, we'll travel for it. These sorts of things that are so vivid and long, you always want to be on the ground so you can see things and just get that tactile sense and meet people and get a sense of them. That's so vital to these kind of long form stories. But obviously, COVID wound up being far more severe than we'd anticipated when we were throwing the idea around. So we just said, okay, we've got to report this remotely. All along, to do a story like this, you typically try to find someone in the country that you're reporting in that can kind of show you the ropes. The term in the journalism industry is a fixer, someone that can help arrange you, or set up interviews, point you to the right spots, help you with the geography, help you with the culture, et cetera. And so I would have been with the guy I ended up finding and working with, Joe Henley. I would have been with him on the ground. But then once we realized that we couldn't travel, if I tried to get over there, it would have been a 2-week quarantine before I could even do anything. Obviously we're not going to pay for that. That's just a massive amount of investment. So we said, okay, well, maybe it'll diminish the story. We're not sure, but we'll try to report this one out remotely. And Joe can go check some things out in person for me and then set up interviews via video conference, much like this. So that's how we got started. He found one of Gigi's hiking friends, and for background, Gigi was known as the Bikini Climber, a famous hiker in Taiwan who fell and died in a tragic accident. But she had become very famous through her photos and actually did a lot to improve conditions for the mountaineering community in Taiwan. That was kind of the underreported part of the story that we found. But anyway, so Joe set up this first interview, and I'd never done, frankly, in all my journalism career, I've done thousands of interviews. I can't say I've ever done a video conference interview. I've done tons of phone, tons of in person, but I just never thought to try a video conference. But this necessitated it, the conditions of the world that we found ourselves in. And these were all late, 13 time zone difference, late, middle of the night, 11 p.m., 3 a.m., 6 a.m. First one we hopped on, I forgot the name of the app. I want to say it was called Jishi. I'm probably wrong here. That was the preferred video conference app that they liked in Taiwan. Hopped on that. It was me and Joe and the translator that he brought aboard. That he's a journalist over there and regularly works with one. He speaks the language but isn't well versed in it enough to hang in an interview like this. And then our source, who was one of Gigi's hiking friends, and I was frankly nervous coming in. I thought this is going to be clunky. It's going to be really hard to try to extract the level of detail that I'm accustomed to in these stories. And that wasn't the case at all. I think being able to interface and see people relative to if it had been a conference call, I think a conference call would have been a mess. But because I could, even though we're not speaking the same language, we could see the emotion in each other's faces, look them in the eye. and the translator and I could go back and forth to clear things up really quickly. It was surprisingly seamless. Having to do with the translator, it definitely took longer because you're sending a question out, translate it, get the answer, translate it back. They have questions, comes back to me. It takes some time, but the format allowed for it. It allowed you to kind of hang and stay engaged. Looking at him, seeing the dynamic, the interplay, the emotion on his face. Even though I can't understand him, I can kind of get the vibe of what he's talking about. So that one went really well. And from that interview, we got leads on a couple other sources, and it kind of snowballed from there and eventually connected with Gigi's family. And in all, we probably did about, probably maybe 10 interview sessions with a total of 15 or 17 people or so to report the story out over the course of a month or so. And we just kind of got in a good rhythm. And I was stunned that I was able to, without traveling, kind of engage on the human level that way, all 13 time zones away, a different language, but I could still come to understand who Gigi was and how she affected these people that were in her lives and how she affected the country. So it was very unique, very rewarding reporting process. And the story came out far better than I would have thought if you told me when we started, yeah, you're going to have to do this over video conference for a month. Good luck. I thought that's really going to hinder it, but it worked out quite well.
How have you thought about the use of technology in these types of interviews? And how have you thought about maybe in past interviews some ways that it might have actually helped in some situations? Have you had any feedback on that?
Well, I know I definitely, because a couple of routes there. One is, when you have to kind of cold call somebody, it's really impersonal. Especially a lot of the stories I do are human interest. Someone has died or known someone that's died, or there's been some sort of trauma, and it's really hard to walk up to that. I always try to lead with an email if I can. And even after the initial email, it's a touchy phone call. It's always tough because you don't want to spook them. You want to be as human as you can. So even for those initial chats, even if they're off the record, getting to see someone, I think in retrospect would help a lot. Back through all those stories I did when I was writing for the NCAA's magazine, that would have, there was some sensitivities there, and to be able to just look them in the eye before we schedule a trip or anything, I think would help a lot. And even as the second prong there, I suppose, is for doing interviews, if you want to capture some multimedia tidbits to, if I post a feature, I'd love to be able to put up here's a little interchange between me and the profile subject, or me and the athlete's the athlete who died's mother, and you get kind of that human look at it, as opposed to just an audio recording that you try to post to promote the story. It doesn't resonate in the same way. And I used to be kind of spooked by that. I thought having to tell a source, hey, so I need you to be on your computer. I need you to open this link and do X and Y. As a reporter, I was like, I need this to be I need as few barriers as possible. I need it to make it as easy as I can on the other end in order to pull off these interviews. But as technology's gotten better, and COVID has kind of shown me, it's kind of forced me into, for work and social, how powerful video chats can be and how useful they can be. One of the next stories I'm doing, I kind of had those initial off the record calls with potential sources yesterday, and I think it's just been normalized because of COVID. They just suggested off the bat, yeah, we'll just do these as video calls. It wasn't even me. And I'd never had that before, right? I just think that's just kind of the way people are doing business. And I would say that those initial calls can be kind of tough when you're wading into sensitive waters, but because we were looking at each other, the rapport was really good. I did 3 or 4 yesterday, and we're off to a really strong start. And I think that the format really helped that.
Does it seem like that's the trend where journalism is going? And I don't mean this in a ignorant way. Of course, we're doing more multimedia, we're doing more video, but excuse me. But the trend being, we see this as a more valuable piece of the bigger story, is to get that first person account or that in-home experience. I've noticed a lot of the interviews that have been done through Blinder with some of our partners. Really, they have a more fun conversation sometimes, or they have a more emotional conversation, because they not only see that person eye to eye, but they see what's around them, right? So you always see the funny things where the kid walks in on the journalist who's doing their BBC business interview, and they walk in the office without their, whatever. But there's even smaller things, like just talking about, the maps on the wall behind you and getting a story out of that. Do you see that as a trend going forward in this digital space?
I think anything you can do to recreate the in-person interview experience is vital. the story I did at the NCAA about the runner who passed away, only way we pulled that off was that her mother welcomed me into their home, and we were able to really, we sat in her house for 4 hours the first day and came back and did it again. And that kind of interpersonal connection was so vital to getting her to open up and really make the story what it was. And any facsimile of that you can get there versus just a phone call, I think goes a long way towards just saying, hey, yeah, I know he's a reporter. I know he's here to write and do a job, but he's also a human. He's also a person that is caring and empathetic. And and this sort of conversation communicates emotion and empathy much better than the mere phone call, where you can have the odd silences and you're not, on video, I might be nodding and kind of solemnly soaking in what you're saying. On the phone, you say something profound or emotional.
Are you still there?
Yeah, are you still there? Right. So that's a big difference. And yeah, like the little personal touches. Like I haven't had anyone ask me about the maps yet, but
you're the reporter, not the source, right?
But those little touches, sure. I think it helps. Anything you can do, particularly for the sort of stories that I do, that can make you feel more approachable, more human, and more empathetic, which you are, but it's tough to communicate that in different mediums, really helps the finished product.
Yeah, I'll be a little revealing here as we started the call. I think the first thing you asked me is that there for anything? It's really just tying the room together. I don't play it. My 2-year-old plays it better than me by just walking by and trying to open it, which he likes to do. Opening a guitar is a new thing I learned about. They don't really open, but he's going to find a way. But yeah, it's just kind of breaking the ice type of thing. I don't want to pat you on the back, but you're really great at being a very human reporter and being very empathetic to your source. Before you even ask the first question, what are some tips you would give journalists on that? Not only in the face-to-face interview, but reporting now through, we've all done too many Zoom calls. We're all pretty comfortable with getting on or figuring out how to get on, but what are some extra key steps that you think have helped in your, one story you've reported, how to break the ice a little bit?
Certainly, if you do have some stories in your portfolio that either subject matter wise or tonally reflect kind of what you're angling towards, I always like to lead. If I can, I always try to start with an email. And if I can include 2 or 3 pieces, like, hey, this is the sort of work I do. Tonally, it's going to feel like this. Read it, see what you think, and it's a way of building trust. Like, hey, he's done this before. He can handle sensitive stuff. So if you have that, in your portfolio, definitely try to share those just to kind of give them a sense of what they're wading into. And I like to lay out expectations early. For this next one I'm doing, is probably going to take a couple months of reporting, and it's going to involve a few trips. I'm going to drive for the first time during COVID to go meet with people in person and stay 6 feet apart. But you lay all that out to start so that they know what the expectations are. I'm going to do 2 or 3 trips. We're going to hop on video calls intermittently, that sort of stuff. And if you just set expectations and level set kind of the logistics of it on top of the, hey, I do this sort of empathetic work, and just approach them as a human. I'm interested in your story because of X reason. It appealed to me because of X reason on the human level, which is true. I mean, you wouldn't do the work if it didn't. If you can lay all that out early and then engage with them in a setting like this early, then it really helps build trust. Like I was talking about the experience yesterday, like coming into 3 or 4 interviews with people I'd never met before, and now I feel like I know them pretty well, and we have a good plan moving forward, and everyone's kind of in lockstep to get the piece knocked out. And it was a good feeling getting through yesterday. You wake up at 6:30 a.m. for early interviews. I'm totally uncertain how it's going to go, and by the end of the day, you can kind of like see the roadmap. And that was through 4 video calls. It was great.
Well, that's something I wanted to hit on too, and I think you might expand on it a bit, where it's not just you and your coworkers being part of the team. It's the sources, it's the research, it's the, if you have a translator, it's the other parts that fit into that. So what are the changes to how that kind of story teamwork was 6-8 months ago to where it is now? How has that changed maybe?
So from my end as the writer, because SI's writers, whether freelance or staffers, they kind of live spread out all over the country. And I think the experience from the writer's perspective has been very similar. Like I used to pop into the office once, I think I went 2 or 3 times once a year. I try to check in, but obviously now that hasn't happened in a bit. But interactions with the editor, interactions with the fact checker, those sorts of things, they all feel very similar. I think the dynamic for them, for the core staff, the copy desk, the editors, the photo department, they're normally used to probably swinging by each other's offices and, just having quick conversations. It's such a hectic job and they're so busy all the time. And now I think that that's probably impacted them quite a bit. So I'm sure that they may be leaning on these sorts of interactions more than they would have in the past. But as the writer kind of out as a satellite, it's still kind of check in via email, do your reporting, deliver the story, and then all the other interaction is, quick phone calls with the editor or, edits back and forth. But I would imagine that when they gather, they call it conferencing at the end of the story process. And it's the two editors that read it, the fact checker, photo department, et cetera. I think they used to all get in a room and hunker down. Okay, today we're conferencing the Gigi Wu story all day. Now I think that's probably happening. I can't speak to it. The writer's not part of that. I just field questions, but I would imagine that it's probably happening in a forum like this.
Yep. Yeah, makes sense. What kind of things would make your job simpler right now? Or even if we were naturally, going about our day mask free, what kind of things are on the wish list for Brian Burnside?
The absolute number one is affordable, accurate transcription. When I was at the NCAA, we were able, it's a big organization. We were able to expense that for these stories. You do hours and hours and hours of interviews, and that saved for some of those stories. I was doing, 15 hours of interviews, 20 hours of interviews. And to actually just transcribe it all myself, that's, fitting it in a work week. It's like a whole week or 2 weeks. And some of the early SI pieces that I did, I would send them off just because I didn't have the time because I had a full-time job on the side. But now that I'm kind of freelance and have a little more time on my hands, I've been doing all my transcribing as I go. And it wipes out entire days. One of my next stories, I've done 4 or 5 interviews over the last week or two. And I just try to get the transcriptions knocked out as soon as I'm done, but it just chews up the afternoon. And that's time I could be spending reporting or going through public documents or any number of other things. And it's just really monotonous. And some reporters like it, and I do get a little bit of value out of it because you can hear the conversation again and hear the tone and stuff. But when you're doing the volume of reporting that I tend to do for stories, just being able to get, 500 pages of accurate transcriptions dumped on you that you can then review is so vital and such a big time saver. So for me, that's priority one right now. And I'm sure the tech will get there eventually, but yeah, as far as I know, it's either really expensive and a human does it, or the digital stuff. I have not found one that has done it terribly accurately yet.
One more quick-ish answer question. What has been the biggest surprise for you, even if it's personally or professionally, of the last 6 months?
Well, 2 things. For the job, it's that people are really interested in kind of the more off the beaten path stuff that I've been doing that are not related to COVID, not related to the moment. My editor said those are doing really well, so keep pitching those and doing those. Like Gigi Wu has nothing to do with COVID, but people they need a distraction, so that's been really heartening. And 2 is both personally and professionally, like how central like Zoom and other video conferencing softwares have been to day-to-day life. Like I do a weekly chat with college buddies on video conference, like every Saturday night we get together and do online games and have a cocktail, and it's really helped for mental health, during all this. And then like I've talked about at length here, just for, pulling off the story like Gigi Wu and moving forward to the next ones, like relying on this sort of tech has really opened my eyes, and I look forward to it. And I used to be really kind of skittish about it and scared of it because I had a set way of doing things. So kind of staring at this computer screen, has become central to my life in a way that if you'd asked me 9 months ago, are you going to be doing video chats for fun or for work? I would have said, no way, man. Like, it's just not how
video chats for fun. We'll see how retinas feel when they're 7 years old.
Maybe that's a little dystopian. I don't know. But it's been a good lifeline through all of COVID, being isolated from people you care about. And it's also, like I said, made work, particularly work that deals with emotion and nuance and connection. It's improved that vastly. So that's been a big shift in personal life and work life, certainly.
Oh, that's great. Well, you failed. You didn't make me cry this whole interview, so I have to kick you out. But hey, thanks for the time. Thanks for joining me. Brian Burnside, Sports Illustrated's latest edition is online at sportsillustrated.com, obviously, and read the story of the Bikini Climber. That's Gigi Wu. All right, thanks for joining me. Great to have you on. Great to see you again, and we'll see you next time on the other side.
All right. Thanks, man.